Better Preach, episode 55, my day of routine for a talk. Welcome to Better Preach, a podcast for Catholic leaders on developing and delivering great Catholic talks. I'm your host, Ryan O'Hara, a 25-year vet of college and young adult ministry. Thanks for inviting me into your journey of communicating the true, the good, and the beautiful. You know, I love checklists and systems. Doing it once, writing it down, and then putting the plan on repeat. Why keep reinventing the wheel, right? When the routine needs tweaking, make the edit, update it, and put it back on repeat. This is especially true for me day of, for the talks that I give. I have routines and checklists that I follow before, during, and after a talk. Again, this is just my routine. What I hope is that it inspires you to make your own. What do you need day of at the venue as a speaker to be most effective? Be intentional. Decide. The consistency and the extra brain space will definitely pay off. I'm joined again today by the best occasional co-host I know, Connor Flanagan, as we run through the before, during, and after routine for every talk I give. I hope it blesses you and inspires you to nail down your routine. And if you want to follow along as you listen or review afterwards, there's a PDF download linked in the show notes that summarizes what we've talked about. I hope you'll check it out. If this podcast has been helpful to you, please let me know. You can share a rating or a written review. Let's not do one or the other. Let's do both. Share a rating and a written review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. But also, if you just want to reach out and let me know what you think of the show, please do. ryanohara.org/betterpreach. There's a contact form right there. And finally, I'd love to connect on Instagram at Better Preach. Come say hi. Let's get into it.
Welcome back, Better Preach.
Yo.
These episodes are my favorite because...
You're on them.
Well, yeah, because I'm on them. That's right. Yeah. They're clearly your best episodes because I am hosting you.
They are pretty good. They are really great, actually.
No, but I get to dig in and help the world see the parts of your life and your process that I get to see on a regular basis.
Yeah.
That's honestly been one of my favorite parts of these episodes. The Ryan that I get to know in person up close is starting to come out a little bit more. You interview everybody else, but when I get to interview you, I get to kind of pull out and help share with the world your processes and practices and preparation for talks and events and things you're a part of.
Thanks.
So we're going to do that again today. We're going to dig into what it looks like for Ryan O'Hara to show up at an event, what you do before, during, and after. You know, you talk so much with people about the talks they give, and there's an episode that you've put out already about the process of giving the talk. But now what about the process of the day, right? Mm-hmm. So walk us through it. What happens?
Yeah, so there's always what I do the day of before the talk, what I ensure during the talk is true, and things I always do after the talk. And that's what I kind of want to walk us through. So the before, and this is generally day of. I'll get into specifics that I always do day of before a talk. And a lot of times I'm giving talks locally. So a lot of times I'm driving to the talk. It could be 30 minutes, it could be 2 hours, but oftentimes I'm driving. This would also be true if I'm not driving, if I'm flying in somewhere or whatever, but the same principles are at play. And this doesn't always happen day of, but I usually try to do it right before. I try to go to confession. Mm-hmm. That's been a really important piece. I go to confession somewhere between once every 6 weeks to 2 months. Now, I give talks at about that rate, well, maybe a little bit more than that. But if it's a big talk, if I haven't been to confession and it's time, me giving a talk is always the thing that sort of says, "Hey, you gotta get straight." So I just gave a talk earlier this week on Monday. So my first talk in a good amount of time, and I knew I needed to go to confession, and so that was a part of my day of prep, or usually happens a day or two ahead. I'm always mindful of that. So confession, if needed, is a really important piece. But then the others are also kind of related to prayer.
I love these.
I have my talk ready to go. I feel confident with where all of those details are, but there's a consistent thing that I do. And before I jump in the car, I will always ask good friends of mine to pray for me. I have about 10 or 12 guys who will get a text and let them know that I'm giving a talk, and I ask them to intercede for me. And I also put something usually on social media, but not always. I'll always ask, though, these guys to pray for me. And it became kind of a joke in my men's group. We would refer to them as car videos. It was a running joke, another car video, because I would always remember, just as I'm leaving, get in the car, turn on the video, ask people to pray for me. So that's a huge piece. So I get to confession, I ask for intercessory prayer, ask for people to pray for me. And then as I'm driving, I love to listen to podcasts. A lot of times I'll listen to sports radio, but I don't do that on the way to a talk. It's almost like I feel like I'm in, it's like game time or something.
Oh, so totally.
It's always worship music in the car. I just want to be in prayer. I actually don't like to schedule a call, for instance. I don't want to do business or even catch up with a friend. I literally just want to drive and to pray. And so that's the third piece. The next thing is, once I get settled at the venue, greet the folks who are having me, make sure that things are kind of ready to go. I'll always look for an adoration chapel. If it's 10 minutes, if it's 15 minutes, it's 20 minutes, I want to spend that amount of time that I have. I usually try to get to the venue, just as a general rule, an hour early. So that's been my kind of rule of thumb. Much earlier than that, people aren't there, or, I could pray, but I've had my personal prayer that day. This is kind of my time right before the talk dedicated to pray. And one of the things I always do in adoration is I'll have my talk, it'll be ready to go. And I usually spend the first 10 minutes just kind of, again, praying with the talk, writing kind of final notes in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament. But then at one point, this is something I started doing in the last kind of 5 years, I'll take the talk and I literally put it on the floor as just a sign of I'm offering this to you, Lord.
Lay it down.
I don't know where else to put it. I suppose I could put it on the seat in front of me. I just put it on the floor. Lord, I give this to you, and then I get on my knees and ask him to lead and to fill that talk. So that's kind of been a powerful ritual of mine, and letting go and just kind of putting that there. And then the next thing I want to make sure always happens, and more and more, teams are initiating this, that they want to pray as a group. I haven't always experienced that, and don't always experience that where I go to speak. But praying with the team that's inviting you, that has been crucial. If they don't mention it, I'll bring it up. Hey, would you pray with me before we start? And then very, very practically, because I have like a bird bladder, so I've got to go. I always go to the bathroom.
Oh, dude, you have to.
And inevitably, I'll have the lavalier mic on me. And I'm roaming around, and I'm going right. I'm hoping this thing's not on, but I go right to the bathroom.
I love it.
That is kind of a neurotic piece of my just before.
Hey, it's part of everybody's prep, though. Someone's got to talk about it, and here we are.
Let's go. You can always find me in the bathroom just before we start.
Are you a stickler, though? Let's say, I'm sure you've had events where maybe less than half of these things happen. Your flights are delayed, traffic, you're rolling in late, things are unorganized. How do you operate because you are a very process-driven guy, you like to be organized. How do you operate if you're coming in and you're like, hey, Ryan just showed up and you have to just start? You go to the bathroom and then you're up there.
I would say that hasn't happened a ton. And, my setup at a place or me getting there is pretty simple. If I'm there and there's 40 minutes of time, I can do these things. But if for some reason I'm running late, a lot of times it would be because of local traffic.
Right.
I just know I'm praying in the car. So
here we go.
I just have these little backups that kind of help me to know. And even I because I try to pray on a daily basis. I don't do a ton of like dedicated prayer just for the talk. I do a lot of that as I prep,
Yeah.
but I don't have like a whole ritual around how I want to pray for talks separate from my personal prayer time.
Yeah.
So I have been in situations where I don't get to do all like this is I'm sorry, I should say this is ideal.
Totally.
And it often happens, but not always. But it's also, I don't believe in it like it's magic.
Yeah.
I believe in the Lord and what he's doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
That's such a good question. Yeah. I don't always hit those.
Yeah. Well, I love what you said about the prayer too. And I think I remember talking about this in another episode, but I think the best prep for any event talk for me shows is, have you been walking the walk?
Yeah.
Like God.
Do you have
God
a personal relationship with God currently?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a must.
Yeah.
That is a must.
Yeah.
So I love that.
And it actually is almost all of it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Before, now, or during.
Yeah.
The event's starting.
So one of the main things, so I think through three things I always am talking to the venue about. Let's sort out the podium. I always have notes. So there's got to be some place to put my notes.
Yeah.
Let's talk through the microphone and figure out what's best there and make sure we have a bottle of water. And so those three things are things usually that the venue provides.
Let's get real quick. Let's go on the microphone. You hands-free?
Hands-free, 100%. So I prefer a lavalier mic that can, usually I have some kind of button-down shirt or a collared shirt that can, it's great for guys. We can just plug the lav right there.
Bro tank even, they clip really nice on a bro tank, you know.
Dude, could you imagine? Oh man, I would look so terrible in a bro tank. But anyhow, gotta be hands-free. If it's not a hands-free lav, I would still prefer even a boom mic.
Really? Over holding a microphone?
Oh, absolutely.
Wow.
So I am committed wholeheartedly to hands-free. Because
would you ever have somebody else hold a mic for you for a whole talk?
No.
How committed are you?
I'm not that committed. How
committed are you, Ryan?
I would hold a mic if I had to. But let it be cordless.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
I rarely will I have to hold a corded mic. That would be,
it's old school hip hop right there, man.
Old school hip hop. That's not me, but yeah. So for me, I've actually also changed a little bit of what I've been doing with the podium. I used to be all music stand all the time.
Yeah.
But I've started to see a value of, well, first of all, a music stand isn't.
It's not a podium.
It's not a podium.
Aesthetically pleasing.
It just kind of looks. It looks junky a little bit.
Yeah.
And I've used it literally hundreds of times. So okay. But I've started to ask if is there a high top table?
Oh yeah. And
that has become the go-to for me because there's a lot more room.
Yeah.
And I usually have if it's a 30 to 40 minute talk, you know this about me, for every page that I have of notes, that's 10 minutes of speaking. Almost no matter what.
I did not know that about you. No.
So if you want to know how long, if I want to know how long my talk is, down to literally if I have 3.5 pages of notes, that will be a 35-minute talk.
Dang. Cool.
Almost.
So if Ryan rolls up with 10 pages,
look out.
Buckle up.
Well, because here's what happens. I'll roll up with 5 pages. That's a 50-minute talk.
Yeah.
But I'm supposed to give a 35-minute talk. I have lied to myself.
Yeah.
you know?
Wow.
And so I've learned that obey that rule, Ryan.
Yeah.
You know,
totally.
and so yeah. So I'll have 3 to 4 pages of notes. And so it goes great on a podium.
Mm-hmm.
And you can already, and I always, when I get up there, I kind of spread them out so it's easy to move them if I need. I'll have a Bible open. And this is something I've been doing more too. Actually, both of these have been in part because of the influence of this podcast. As I've talked to people, I've changed to using the podium and seeing kind of the value of that.
Or high top.
I'm sorry, using the high top table.
Yeah.
But also, I have to confess, for the longest time, I wouldn't use my Bible to read Bible verses. I would just have them in my notes.
Yeah.
And I would read them if I needed from my notes. But as I've been doing, this is probably one of the biggest impacts that the podcast has had on me as I've interviewed people over and over and again. They've witnessed how important it is to them and to others to see them reading from an actual Bible.
Yeah, man.
There's something that's decidedly different and important about that. And so I've started to do that. Now, part of the challenge is I'm almost 50. So my eyes, just honestly, even with glasses, I've never had good eyes anyway. Like it's hard for me. I have to read bigger type. So that's been part of the reason that I've had it on my page.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm trying to work out a Bible that actually I can read more easily. I'm kind of feel goofy saying this, but that's become a more important part. What I do is if it's just one verse or if it's multiple verses, I'll open it up to that page and then I'll make sure I'm clear on the page where the verse is. But if it's multiple verses, I put little like pieces of tape, colored tape on those pieces of pages from the Bible to easily go.
Awesome.
So that's the Bible and notes. I always have paper notes. I never use an iPad or a computer to speak from. And then the next piece is a timer. This has been a really important piece, and it's just my phone. So I always put your phone on Do Not Disturb. I have gotten text messages, I have gotten phone calls, and I have stupidly allowed them to kind of, like I've actually allowed them to be they've been a distraction where I actually sometimes I've even had to address it, sorry, so I learned, pretty early on, keep it on Do Not Disturb. And because I use it as a timer, I have an app that I like. It's called Presentation Timer.
Oh, cool.
And so,
can you link that in the show notes?
I could. It's actually pretty good, and I think it's free. But you tell it I like a countdown.
Yeah.
So if I start, if it's 40 minutes, I hit the start as I'm going up, and I can just glance at that to see how much time I have left. Venues don't always have a clock, and they certainly don't have an easy digital clock. They have an analog clock way in the back that is sometimes hard to see.
Yeah.
So I always make sure I've got this presentation timer available. And then when it comes to slides, I always have somebody else advance the slides, and I give them a transcript of my talk, show them in the talk where the slides are. And I don't worry about it.
Yeah.
I give my talk. I want the talk to be about the talk, the slides to be what they're going to be.
Slides aren't a make or break for you.
No, they're not. They're there to help support the talk and help kind of drive home certain ideas and words and phrases that I think are important. So it's a very simple, kind of stripped down version of slides, hopefully, helpful.
Yeah.
So that's those key things: the podium, the microphone, the water, how I handle my notes, how I use the Bible, and this is something that I'm working on and changing. It's been really good. Always having a plan for timer, and then an approach to how slides are handled. This has just been my consistent thing that I'm making sure is true during a talk.
It's great because that can be anywhere. That could be in a church basement. It could be in a gymnasium. It could be in someone's house even. These things are just like consistent, functional practices of what happens during. I love that.
Yeah, and it helps to me now knowing here's what I need. And in fact, one of the things I hope to get into this in a future episode, but I communicate about the podium and the microphone and the water, and I kind of tell them my preferences ahead of time. I have a web page for those who have hired me that has a bio and headshots and some of these specifics, so that it's just easy for them to follow that.
That's the way to do it.
Yeah.
All right, the event's done. What's happened afterwards?
The event's done, and hopefully I'm not in the throes of self-condemnation. I'm often so critical of I don't know. I'm sure you could relate to this, maybe even more so than I would, because your shows are such an offering of yourself. And depending on the topic, because I think vulnerability is a key piece of giving a talk. I do often feel like there's this vulnerability hangover.
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever experienced that giving shows.
Dude, I real quick, I played a show, what's today? 2 days ago.
Yep.
I played a show 2 days ago, and the show was awesome. The day was a little rocky, and which was surprising to me because it was a local show. Like
Right.
logistically, it should have been very easy
So much
to
easier.
pull off.
Yeah.
And man, the next morning I was just in the throes of defeat.
Really? Yeah.
Just like a full-on wave of defeat came over me, and I couldn't shake it. I could not shake it. And so yeah, I feel you there.
Yeah, and I don't feel that way during the thing. It's like the waves that come.
Yeah.
And the only way I can refer to it, it feels like a vulnerability hangover. Like I've just exposed myself.
Yeah.
And how do I feel about that?
Yeah.
And so anyway, usually I can kind of navigate that, but oftentimes that's how I'm feeling right after I give the talk. Like, oh boy, I trust you, Lord. I hope that went well.
Yeah.
But afterwards, I also have kind of some rituals as well. A lot of times I'm driving, and so I love me some Diet Dr. Pepper.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the nectar of the gods, second only to black coffee.
Of course.
So I will stop and I'll get a Diet Dr. Pepper and peanut M&Ms. And I'll listen to not worship music, and I will turn on my sports radio, and I will
celebratory drive.
I will veg out and just kind of let myself go.
Well deserved.
Yes, I was going to say something inappropriate, but I won't. I smoke a joint, and it's all. I do not do that. But anyway, I treat myself.
Yeah,
I treat myself.
So
that's all. And can I tell you one more? This is kind of a dirty little secret on treating myself beforehand. Do you know what my guilty pleasure before an event, and even with the worship music in the car, I don't know if this works, I always get Taco Bell.
No way.
Yahweh. Yes,
Dude,
actual way.
That might be one of the most, I don't know. You heard it here first, folks. On Better Preach. Ryan is crushing Taco Bell. If you see him give a talk, he has.
I might have just eaten a bean burrito or chicken chipotle ranch burrito.
I love that so much.
Isn't that funny? I don't know why I feel that like that's like I would never want to crush McDonald's or something like
Taco Bell. It just fits. It works.
It's just right on the edge of.
Dude, I got a massive platter of Raisin Canes on my way home from my last show.
Now that sounds great.
That was
wonderful. I love to eat also at like
the post show munchies.
Yeah, like that is just the best.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's always the Diet Dr. Pepper. Sometimes it's always the M&Ms. Sometimes we're also throwing in a bag of chips and salt and vinegar, and we are all good.
It's great. So treat yourself.
Treat myself, and always want to send a thank you note. I always want to, again, reach out to the folks who hired me, whether via text, a voicemail, an email, some way of always just acknowledging, like, it is such an honor to be able to do this.
Mm-hmm.
I just am so grateful for those opportunities. And what I've seen often is a good talk, a great talk can lead to many other opportunities. I'm interested in partnering with people who have a vision for what God is doing in the church, and nothing is more exciting or important. I don't feel like I'm kind of a mercenary who would just be hired to come in and say some things. I care so much about that church and those people, but really the leaders. And so fostering that relationship is really key. And then the last thing I do to kind of close out a talk is to take a picture of my speaker notes that have kind of the markup of the final notes that I took to get ready for the talk. And those become kind of what I call my actuals. I have my speaker notes. I might have an outline or a handout, might have a PowerPoint, but then the last piece is to actually take a picture of what I call my actuals, and I put that in the folder for that talk, and that kind of closes it out.
It's awesome. I love it. I think this kind of behind the scenes look into your practices and processes around this stuff are so good, so valuable. I think how else do people learn? I know for a musician, for me, like I learn by going to concerts and watching and talks are much more few and far between to be able to go. And then even then, you don't get to see a process unfold. You just get to see the presentation. And so I think this is super, super valuable. And I think we should do more of these.
Yeah. And what I've learned, this, I guess I would say what this is my process.
Mm-hmm.
And as I've interviewed a lot of people, I would say there's a lot of similar kind of overlaps.
Yeah.
But everybody has their thing.
Yeah.
And I think the reason I'm sharing it is just to give you an example of what works well for me and what has become a consistent habit.
Yeah.
But I hope what that would do is inspire people to decide themselves, like, what do I need to do day of? What does, say, prayer look like for me? How do I want to think about microphones?
Yeah.
And because again, what often happens, like say with microphones, they'll say, do you have any preferences? Most people will say no, only out of like just not wanting to be difficult.
Yeah.
And I always want to go the other way. Be intentional.
Yeah. People appreciate that.
Because again, churches nowadays, this was not true 25 years ago. Everybody has gear nowadays. Everybody's got whatever you probably need.
Yeah.
Tell them what you need.
Yeah.
And make sure, I need a bottle of water. I need 2 bottles of water. I usually have one on the podium and one at the foot in case I need it.
Yeah.
And I just have learned that it's going to help the talk. You having the mic that you feel comfortable with, the podium you feel comfortable with, the bottle of water or a cup of water, whatever you need, again, hopefully within reason. Have a plan, for your slides.
Yeah.
And just know what you're able to do, what you're not able to do. I have found 9 times out of 10, venues are more than happy to accommodate these kind of reasonable requests. And then when they ask you, they also appreciate you knowing what you want.
Totally.
So I found that's been really helpful.
It's so good. Well, hopefully some of these things can inspire and help out y'all who are listening, and especially the Taco Bell piece. I hope people actively listen to this episode and then go crush some tacos.
I just had to be honest. I feel a little. I always feel you do, right? Every time you pull into the drive-through at Taco Bell, you feel a little bit of shame. You're like, I shouldn't be here, but I am.
Yeah,
and I'm gonna kill these burritos right now.
Yeah, you got to own it, man.
Okay.
Maybe we can get Better Preach a sponsorship.
Dude, I'd love that.
Better Preach, live Moss. It works.
Preach.
It works.
Moss.
Well, thanks for joining us on this episode of Better Preach. Ryan, crushing it as always.
Catch you next time.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
See ya.
Peace. If this podcast has been helpful to you, please let me know. Share a rating and a written review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or on my website at ryanohara.org/betterpreach. There's a contact form there. And you all have millions of choices when you podcast. Thanks for press and play today. I'm so grateful. See you next time.